Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into something absolutely massive, the sheer scale of the projected global economy for 2026. We're going to unpack exactly where the world's wealth is actively being generated, how the balance of economic power is shifting right under our feet, and what happens when the biggest economic titans out there start changing their trade policies.
Okay, let's just get right into it. $126 trillion. I mean, it's a number with so many zeros it kind of makes your head spin, right? But this staggering figure is the International Monetary Fund's projected nominal global GDP for the year 2026, and that's assuming a 3.1% global growth rate. This is the total value of all goods and services produced worldwide. To put that massive scale into perspective, $126 trillion is enough to hand every single person on Earth over $15,000. Every single car manufactured, every software subscription sold, every cup of coffee poured, it all rolls up into this one monumental figure.
But, before we get completely lost in the sheer magnitude of that number, let's put it into some perspective. And honestly, this is the part that really blew my mind. Just 4 countries generate half of this global output. Think about what that actually means for a second. Out of nearly 200 nations on Earth, just 4 are responsible for creating 50% of the entire world's economic value. It's just an incredible testament to how deeply concentrated global wealth and productivity are at the very top of the ladder.
Section 1. A visual breakdown of world output.
So, when we actually map this out, looking at that projected 3.1% global growth for 2026, things get really interesting. Right away, you can see the United States economy, sitting at a projected $32.4 trillion, makes up over a quarter of the entire planet's GDP. Just one nation holding more than 25% of the world's economic weight. It's a fascinating macro view, and it perfectly sets the stage for us to understand the dynamics of modern global trade.
Section 2. A top-heavy global economy. Zooming in on the titans.
The reality of global economic power is pretty stark. On one side of the coin, you've got the United States, China, Germany, and Japan. Together, these 4 nations are pumping out over $63 trillion in economic output. And on the exact opposite side? Well, that's literally the rest of the world. That means the combined output of those 4 titans is roughly equal to the output of the nearly 190 other countries combined. When you realize that, you really begin to understand exactly who dictates global trade dynamics and why their internal policies tend to ripple out so violently across the rest of the globe. Let's actually break down the exact figures for the top 6 projected economies in 2026, because the concentration here is just profound. We have the US leading at a massive $32.4 trillion. China follows at $20.9 trillion. Then there's a pretty significant drop-off to Germany at $5.5 trillion and Japan at $4.4 trillion. Rounding out the top 6, we have the United Kingdom at $4.3 trillion and India right on its heels at $4.2 trillion. This incredible bottleneck of wealth basically means these 6 nations effectively write the rules for global trade. They dictate supply chains and hold massive leverage over the rest of the developing world.
Section 3. Contrasting growth at the top, size doesn't always equal speed.
Now, here's a really crucial point. Just having a massive economy doesn't guarantee you're growing rapidly. In fact, among the world's 4 largest economies, we're seeing a really stark divergence. China is projected to lead the top 4 with a 4.4% real growth rate. And the US is maintaining a highly respectable 2.3% growth, especially given its massive base size. But contrast that with established historical titans like Germany and Japan. They've faced years of stagnation and are projected to grow by an incredibly sluggish 0.7 to 0.8%. So yes, they are massive, but they're moving very slowly.
But hey, even the leaders face some pretty serious challenges. Let's look objectively at China's situation. While their 4.4% growth outpaces the other top 4 economies, which continues a trend we've seen over the last few decades, by the way, their output is facing significant internal headwinds right now. The IMF projections specifically account for ongoing hurdles, primarily a demographic slowdown as their population ages, combined with a prolonged crisis in their property sector. These are massive structural hurdles that even a nearly $21 trillion economy has to carefully navigate just to maintain its momentum.
Section 4. India and Asia's rise. The shifting balance of economic power.
This brings us to a really fascinating shift in the global order. Looking beyond China and Japan, we've got India. Leveraging its weight as the world's most populous country, India currently sits as the 6th largest economy at $4.2 trillion. Fueled by a massive digital economy and major manufacturing pushes, their trajectory is incredibly steep. We're looking at a remarkably strong 6.6% growth forecast.
Actually, at this pace, the IMF projects India could surpass both the United Kingdom and Japan by 2028. No small feat. But to get there, they've got to overcome some immense structural challenges, namely modernizing their infrastructure and securing employment for that massive, growing population.
And you know, India isn't the only rising force in the region.
Let's take a quick look at Indonesia. They're a really formidable emerging market with a $1.5 trillion economy and a highly impressive 5% projected growth rate. Though, much like China, their growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. They are actively navigating some pretty significant manufacturing challenges that have been lingering since the COVID-19 pandemic, not to mention complex supply chain pressures linked to broader geopolitical tensions. It's a great reminder that emerging markets often face some intense growing pains, even while they're rapidly expanding.
Section 5. The ripple effects of trade, interconnected economies, and modern tariffs.
So, when you have an economy like the United States that literally makes up over 25% of the world's GDP, any shift in their policy is going to send shockwaves globally. According to the IMF sources, shifting global trade dynamics are actively affecting economic forecasts right now. Specifically, high tariff policies introduced by the U.S. since early 2025 have directly led forecasters to make downward revisions in growth expectations across a number of interconnected economies. We are strictly reporting on the economic data here, and the data shows that when the largest player changes the rules of trade, the immediate surrounding ecosystem feels the strongest impact.
We can actually see exactly who is most exposed by just looking closer to home. Heavily reliant North American economies like Canada, sitting at a $2.5 trillion GDP, and Mexico at $2.1 trillion, are fundamentally intertwined with U.S. trade networks. Because of this deep integration, any new high tariff policies from their dominant neighbor leave them uniquely vulnerable. Essentially, their own growth projections are tied right to the trade climate established by that $32 trillion titan right next door.
All of this creates a period of intense North American uncertainty. Based on the IMF source material, this economic bloc is currently facing some significant friction. We're seeing strained relations, specifically between the US and Canada, and that's coupled with incredibly slow negotiations regarding their overarching trilateral trade agreement. And here's why that matters. When the rules of commerce between three heavily integrated nations become unclear, that uncertainty acts as a huge drag on economic output. It forces economists to temper their future growth expectations.
Well, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, right? From a towering $126 trillion global projection, all the way down to the localized ripple effects of trade policy. And it all leads us to this final, really provocative thought. As massive growth continues to shift toward dynamic nations in Asia, like India, and as rising trade tensions actively redefine established blocs like North America, exactly how long will the current top 4 economies be able to maintain their ironclad 50% hold on the world's wealth? The map is undeniably shifting, and watching who rises and who stagnates in the coming years is absolutely going to define our global future.